Ascent Podcast.
Hey everyone, Matthew here. Before we begin today's show, I just want to remind everyone of this month's sponsor, Whale Street. Whale Street is the DeFi engine that powers NFT economics on a massive scale. They make huge currency swaps happen, or whale swaps as they're called, with very small slippage costs and without crashing the system. They also engineered the largest ever NFT bundle and fractionalized it into the historic B20 tokens. Whale Street is all about upside, so dip into the liquidity pools for rich rewards. For B20, join discord.com/whale. That's discord.com/WHALE. And follow Whale Street on Twitter @WhaleStreetOFFL. Thank you and enjoy the show. Hey everyone, Matthew here, back with another episode of the Matthew and Rizzle Show. Our guest this week is Jess Sloss, founder, creator, and chief instigator over at Seed Club. The incubator focused on social tokens, personal tokens, community tokens, and everything in between. Rizzle and I had the opportunity to talk with Jess about the inspiration behind setting up Seed Club, the current status of the social token movement, where it's going. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you will too. So without further ado, please enjoy the conversation that Rizzle and I had with Jess. Okay, we're live. This is Matthew with my dude Rizzle, and really excited to have Jess Sloss on the show from Seed Club. Welcome to the show, Jess.
What's up?
So to get started, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've been up to, kind of what brought you into crypto in the first place, and what you're most passionate about these days with Seed Club.
Cool. Yeah. Really excited to be here, guys. I am the instigator at Seed Club, and we are a social token incubator. So we run cohorts of projects through a 6-week process that helps them define, design, launch, and in some cases scale their social token projects. I kind of emerged out of this realization that there's just way more questions than there are answers when you start diving down the social token rabbit hole. So we brought a bunch of smart people together to start jamming on that, and really wanted to figure out a way to be in the front lines with people who are experimenting and exploring this crazy cool world that we're so stoked about. So we have about 25 collaborators that we bring to the table and just dive in. We're just about to launch our second cohort next week with a whole bunch of projects that we're really excited to tell the world about when the time is right. And yeah, I guess it's just an extension of I think a Facebook Messenger message I got back in the summer of 2017, which was, have you heard about tokens? And sent me down the rabbit hole of really just seeing the power of tokens giving ownership and value and say over the digital networks that sort of govern the economy that we live in. And today we're recording with this whole GameStop and Robinhood craziness happening. And I think, it's that initial interest has just been reinforced time and time again that, tokens are, wait, is this a family show?
Oh, you can curse.
No, not really. You can curse. Okay. That's the
tokens are fucking awesome. And,
yeah.
And it's like, okay, let's have some ownership over these networks that we are using. And the first Uber driver should be wealthy as shit right now and not still driving for Uber. Yeah, so I mean, that's what got me into it. Worked on a security token launch in 2017, an Oracle project in 2018. And I was sort of in between things when Andrew Lee launched Karma DAO, and I got introduced to what Whale was doing, and my friend Brian sent me a link to his token doing weird things. And this whole world of, adding an asset to small groups of people on the internet and using it to create value and align incentives just kind of captured me. And I guess that was last summer, and here we are right now, having launched our first hackathon, did our first cohort with projects like RAC and Connie Digital and Carlos and his swag token and a bunch of others that are still in the works. And the space is blowing up, and it's just going to be crazy. And just really stoked to have come into such a awesome, smart community of people who've been building before us and really trying to add value however we can.
Yo, this is really cool, man. And you're definitely like preaching to the choir with, myself and Matt, as far as people who, sort of been here since the beginning and seen the value of this concept and these tokens continue to grow and evolve over time. So, dude, I can't help but like want to cut right to the chase. I'm like, all right, Tri-Roll is a arch nemesis, is a competitor, is a friend that's doing a slightly different thing that's just like along the same lines. Or am I like totally off beat here with my comparison?
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Bradley and Sid. Bradley's been a huge supporter of us at C Club.
Okay, that doesn't sound like
they're
arch
members
nemesis.
and collaborators. Yeah, not that, okay. Sorry, maybe I should lean into that. Yeah, we're going after them, man. No, I mean, we see. I think like something I always say is it's really easy to create a token, hard to create value around it, and hard to keep that value growing in the future. And we see ourselves as partnering with platforms like Roll to help creators navigate this world. Like I don't think there's this sort of, we're really interested in templates, and I think we have a couple templates that really work right now in the social token space, but by no means do I believe these are the be all and end all. I think that we're still early on in the evolution of what the tools that we can sort of give creators to create value in and around their tokens. And so, yeah, we, are partners on this journey with Bradley, with Sid, with the Roll team, with Kevin and Mahesh out of Rally, and with the half dozen other interesting projects that are trying to bring functionality and infrastructure to the space.
What's happening in the social money and social token space? It's so interesting. It's just like fundamentally new innovation and tool set that folks have at their disposal, but it's an innovation that's unlike, for example, like the invention of electricity. It's like, yeah, we got electric fire. Let's put that in all the places where people used fire to see before. Like it was a really obvious kind of like one-to-one connection. But with social tokens and money, like it's something that is hard to grok at first. It's something that you don't see. It's like this powerful way to start coordinating between individuals and communities and things like that. So it makes perfect sense that something like Seed Club and this incubator is popping up to kind of shepherd folks along the way, ferret out some of the best practices. And like you said, they create these templates. I think that's super, super smart and make much needed in this area, because like we were talking briefly before the show, it's so complex. There's so much, like when it comes to launching your own token, treasury management, how do you like distribute the tokens to your community, blah, blah, blah. Like the list is endless, I think, in terms of potential pitfalls and problems that folks that particularly are launching their social tokens and social money can kind of run into. But based on your experience in, I guess, your previous cohort and just in the space up until now, I'm just curious, what are some of the like the worst practices that you've kind of noticed time and again when people either launch their token or kind of maybe after a period of time like fall into a pitfall? Like what are the things that people need to start avoiding more and be more cognizant of?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two maybe three. So the first one is it's like it's a real thing, and I think we were talking before the show here as well. Like there's sort of an emotional piece to putting your creativity or yourself, or having yourself sort of traded out on the market. And so I think people doing it without there's a lot of people early on who just jumped in, I think, and didn't put a whole lot of thought into it. So that's just the number one thing. And then two, I think, being thoughtful around how you distribute your token is a big one. Who your early community members are and what their expectations are, and the dynamics you foster early are just so essential. And I think there's like, we don't fully recognize or understand the implications of putting a digital asset in a community. We're trying to build one around a digital asset first. And I think can start to lead to incentives that aren't really conducive to sort of a long-term cohesive, we're on a journey together type of a community that is, I think, what's showing a lot of value in the space right now. So just doing airdrops, just putting them out to people just to get, more wallets holding your tokens. It's something that I think a lot of projects regret doing and are, having to double down and put a lot of extra work into to reformat. And I think, lastly, it's people looking at what other folks have done and just trying to copy rather than think about what they're actually trying to incentivize and build. And, I think we talk about templates a lot. This token gated access is a great template that we think everybody should use to start off with in the space. And also there needs to be clarity of where you want to go and what type of dynamics you want to create both inside and outside that token gate. So, my hope is that we give templates that allow people to feel comfortable and confident in being able to launch something, but that leads to a lot more creativity and experimentation. So we have a lot of, that's, as we look at projects to work with, that's what we're most excited about, is experiments that expand on that basic template. So make sure you have a vision, make sure you realize what you're getting into, and be really careful about who you distribute tokens to early on, so that it at least aligns with both those former points.
Dude, when you're talking about templates, can you give me like a hands-on example of what you're talking about? So say I'm interested in working with you guys to issue a social token. When you're handing out templates, what am I expecting to look at?
Well, I think we use the term template as just like a general structure that works, and that there's sort of utility in and around the token. And I think there's two-ish, depending on how you define them. One, I think the most prevalent one is token gated access to a Telegram or a Discord, or you put walls up. You say, if you want in, you hold this, and if you don't want in, then you don't need to hold this. I think there's a lot of interesting things you can do with structuring subscriptions alongside token gated access, or doing token gated access with multiple roles. I think people who are familiar with what you guys are all about and with Whale are familiar with that sort of template. And I think the other one that's emerging is more of, I guess, the social money route or creator coin route. This idea of creating tokens and trying to swap out maybe a Web 2 version of tipping or value exchange in exchange for this Web 3 version. And so I think that's a more dollar corollary than anything else. It's Twitch points or tipping bots with inside Discord. And so I think those are when we talk to projects, there's often a lot of things they want to do. And one of the things that we are really focused on is starting off simple and in a way that works, so that we do have the opportunity to push and experiment on from a place of strength. And so the templates, I think we're mostly excited about the future of templates. And if there's one thing, I'm really, really stoked on the next projects we work with. I think there's going to be some really successful projects there, monetarily and otherwise. But for us, the big wins are, identifying new ways of creating value in these communities that can be captured by those token holders and the creators of those tokens. And so for me, that's success is a whole bunch of new templates that any other social token community can take on, or new ones can use to really just grow the space.
And sort of starting to unpack and open up that new cohort that you guys are about to get into. But before the show, we were again talking about this, and you're rattling off a bunch of different types of companies, projects, people that, I hadn't heard previous to you mentioning them ever even kind of thinking about using a personal token or a community token or anything like that. Previously, our experience has almost exclusively been with people far down the crypto rabbit hole, either artists or projects like the Whip that have it's really easy to kind of institute our own token to folks that are kind of familiar with what we're doing in crypto. But you're talking about coffee shops and more consumer facing non-crypto projects and people that are entering your cohort. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, and sort of what maybe their expectations and your expectations are for them coming into the cohort, and you kind of talking to them. I'm super curious to hear what the parallels or potential or power could be for social tokens and these more non-crypto consumer facing projects.
Yeah. So, I think that the reason when I talk to more people outside of the social token space, why they're interested in the space, is they see just the ridiculous potential of every influencer, YouTuber, personality out there on the internet having a social token, and the just the attention and I think perceived value that would flow from that. But I'm really, really careful to caution them about, timing and, how early the space is. And so we're, one of our criteria is still having a community or at least a creator who's crypto native or at least crypto adjacent. And so I think, as you alluded to there are a couple of projects that we're working with this cohort that are teasing at the edges of that. I think it's a big wild card for us, really. I think we see a world where mainstream creator economy and crypto creator economy intersect. And I don't think we're there just yet. We're really focused on, figuring out the more crypto side of things, as I think people in the broader creator economy are still trying to, evolve and think through the business from a more Web 2 standpoint. And I see these two trains colliding in the best possible way in the future. And so we're looking for ways of, again, teasing at the edges of that. The coffee brand that you're talking about is definitely a creator who gets it and is interested in taking it slow. And the challenge of explaining it to a broader audience is one that they're really excited about. And then there's a couple others that are, I think, aimed at a more mainstream audience, but it's much more of an educational type community play. And so, again, I think that's like a good way of creating, like, I think if you look at what the Friends with Benefits community has done, they've done a great job at creating a really solid landing place for people who are interested in this thing. And, the channels that are in around like Crypto 101, ask your dumb question type things are really popular. So we're still, really wanting to lean into the more crypto native projects, just given where the market's at right now. But yeah, I think that changes pretty quickly. And we wanted to make sure there was a representation that was at least going to, we don't want to be just living in the comfort zone here. Trying to bring this into a more mainstream audience is definitely outside of the comfort zone. And like, I think if we're not involved in that, we're missing out a huge opportunity.
Dude, I was wondering, sitting here thinking as you're talking, could you like almost take the reverse of Matt's question earlier? Like, based on what you've seen and your expertise, like, who would you say is like really on the forefront or like really sticking the landing with like social token use cases right now? Or who would you say are like the biggest like ground floor like innovators in this space right now? And I know there's a lot of them and so many different like aspects of how you can utilize these things, but like who would you say is like really out in front?
Well, I mean, I think like if you look at projects that are really kicking butt, I think what Whale's done, I think the Friends with Benefits community, and I think what Richard's doing at RNG are all really interesting for their own reasons. We sort of see social tokens as a way of turning social capital into a digital asset and then, doing something interesting with it at that point. And I think, Whale has just birthed this entire world that I don't even fully grasp. I think it's just been, phenomenal to see. And I know, Matt, that's a bunch of things that we've talked about before, just to see like the tentacles of that community and this sort of composability and the expansion and, just this idea of creators as a platform, I think is just going to be a dominant narrative in, the economy moving forward. And I think Whale's a great example of that. Friends with Benefits is probably one of the most fun Discords to be a part of. What Trevor and Cooper and the rest of their team have done there has been really quite impressive. It's a warm place to land. There's a lot of really brilliant people there. You feel like you're a part of a brain trust that is both welcoming and mind expanding. And they're experimenting with seasons, which I think is an interesting concept of, I think they just raised the floor for the number of people of tokens that need to be held to be a part of that community. And so it's really ratcheting up the importance of, I guess, trying to solve the challenge of, do you just want to grow these communities or how do you keep value as you're growing? And so raising the floor is, I think, an interesting experiment in making sure that people really want to be there and that they're high value interactions. And I think Richard at RNG is just, it's funny to call him a contrarian in the space because I think he's definitely not in the broader market, but in social tokens, he's asking some really great questions. And the fact that these tokens don't trade, or maybe it's even more shocking that they haven't traded, given that there's not really a whole lot blocking that. And then just, looking for ways to create and exchange value, and to see how he's it's probably close to 1,500 people in that Discord. Probably one of the more overwhelming Discords to get into. Well, I say that I was in the Wall Street Bets Discord, and that was a whole other side of things. But, they're just really exploring I think all these projects are figuring out ways to get the right people together and then facilitate the sort of emergent behavior and experimentation and innovation in various ways. And they've all sort of stepped forward and have done that, I think, repeatedly. So for me, like, how do you bring interesting people together, pool social capital, have a vision that at least aligns interests, and then have a community leader or leaders who are really just fostering great conversation and intentional collaboration, I guess, and seeing what comes out of it. Because I think that's really like the best ones are projects that have things emerge that nobody involved saw coming.
The emergent value and the emergent just like best practices that you're starting to see from some of the projects and communities that you're talking about. I mean, I think that's just a great indication that right now we're in this like let a million flowers bloom phase, and probably encouraging as much experimentation and risk taking when it comes to different models, and like for friends with benefits, ratcheting up the floor for the token gated access element for these communities is something that long term seems like it can help drive a tremendous amount of value to the coins and then the members and holders in the communities. And I mean, throughout this conversation, the word community has come up over and over, and it probably will continue to come up. I think when we talk about whether it's personal tokens or like explicitly community tokens or artist tokens or music tokens, like at the core of each token in my mind is community in some sense. But I think community is also sort of a word that means like a million different things to people when they hear it and when they say it. So I'm just curious from your perspective, like how are you actually like defining community in your mind, and how are you thinking about community, especially in your position in working with these creators and their communities?
Yeah, I mean, the term social token and the term community are both super broad, and like, I guess the first thing that comes up for me is it's not up to me to define community. I think what we want to see is people who are exploring that in the way that's relevant to them and to their vision. And I think we'll see, let a million flowers bloom and a million definitions of community. I think I'm excited to see what a 3-person squad based community will do in this space, as much as I am about a 250,000 person community that's trading stocks on the internet. So I think it's, one of the things that we're focused on is bringing in people who have a ton of experience in the management of communities. So I think we're really focused on taking whatever the vision is that a creator has and ensuring that they have some of the more tactical or strategic pieces to actually executing on that. So I think behind all of these successful community tokens are human beings who are putting in a heck of a lot of work to maintain the culture, to make people feel welcome, to moderate, and to sort of carry this narrative and move this narrative forward. So, yeah, I have a very broad definition. I'm very comfortable with broad definitions, especially in this space. And I think what I'm focused on is bringing in individuals who have deep experience in building these things in other places to empower our creators to use those skills or ideas or tactics that have worked across different areas and implement them in their own communities. So we have some wonderful mentors and partners who we bring in and introduce to our cohorts to deal with those sort of topics.
Dude, I know you like broad definitions. I'm going to try and nail you down like a little bit, but I think it's also impossible. But, again, man, based on what you've seen like so far, where do you feel like this whole social token movement is headed, like say 4 or 5 years down the line? And are you planning for that now, or is this just sort of like an amoeba that you've got to continue to adapt to as it changes form, or like, how are you positioning what you're doing now for the long run?
We have a firm belief that there's value in coming together and collaborating on the internet, and that for the most part, that value has been captured by platforms and not the people creating that value. And so that's shifting right before our eyes. Not only is there a understanding and demand for that, but there's also the technology and tools to make that happen. So so as much as I like broad definitions, my favorite answer to questions like you just asked are yes, because it's all of the above. I think we definitely have a vision where we think the platforms of the future are not just technology, but they're also creator-led or community-led. Again, I think the news happening today, and don't have to look too far to imagine like just the powerful platform that somebody like a Mr. Beast would have, or that that the Wall Street Bets community has. And I think as the identity and value starts to live in wallets and addresses rather than on social platforms, those communities start to get a lot more power and therefore a lot more value. So I think it's important in this space to have a long-term vision of where this can go. And, that vision for us is that, it's probably going to be more valuable to own and participate in a Mr. Beast community right as it starts than it is to, buy an IPO Airbnb stock. And so, we see a ton of value to be created there. And also the challenge at hand is navigating the next 6 months and a year and making sure that we're building the tools and mental models and infrastructure and doing the education that allows people to fully grok, I think, this opportunity. There's sort of this debate that I keep getting pulled into around, the importance of abstracting away Web3 to be able to onboard more users into crypto. And I think there's a ton of truth to that. Like we need to, there's a lot of work on the user experience and even on the understanding of what this is side of things to get people on board. And also I think there's just something really special and different about being able to own and rather than just pay a subscription fee or just, use a network. And so that I think intellectual infrastructure or contextual infrastructure is so important. And it's probably going to be one of the bigger barriers to getting people in and participating in these networks. And so those are some of the wild cards that I think, shift timelines and potential directions for the space. But we sort of have an undying belief in the power of tokens to empower creators and build platforms around them, and that there's just a ton of value in coming together and collaborating on the internet, and we're working towards that.
So I definitely think like the narrative of empowering the creators and their communities versus just what's happened up until now, which is just platforms have essentially been extracting all the value from all the users and monopolizing and keeping it just for themselves. I don't know anyone that like can disagree or say that they hate that vision, but it's also like super a rose tinted view of the future, right? Like all the communities and creators are happy, and then the bad villains and the kings of social media are like ousted, right? It probably will have like other elements involved there. Like there's going to be bandits that kind of arise, more like I'm imagining a wild west sort of scenario where, yeah, there's great communities and great creators that are doing real positive things, but like with these tools, like since they are tools and anyone can use them however they see fit, I'm just wondering, like, if you have imagined or if you can foresee a future where maybe some not so nice actors come in and start utilizing these tools to coordinate not so nice activities, and how do you see like the other half of this potential future unfolding?
Yeah, man, I love that question, and I am so guilty of being a rose-colored glasses guy because
we all are.
Yes, sure. I think that's the part of being in this space, and yeah, without a doubt, man. Like this is, I came into my career right as social media was becoming a thing, and I very strongly remember seeing how this is going to change the world, and it's democratizing access to publishing, and did I see the change that was ultimately leading to this whole fake news and deplatforming and all the sort of the negative parts that come from it? Not a chance. And I think it's something that I am trying to be a lot more aware of. And so, anywhere where people can come together and do good, people can come together and do bad. And, I don't think it's hard to imagine, groups coming together to manipulate stocks, not with a positive narrative behind it, but rather one just of profit and trying to, go after certain groups or, corporate espionage type things. I think, the cybersecurity threats or hacking and all this sort of stuff would get empowered by having a shared asset behind it. I think there's, a ton of just personal challenges that come from launching tokens without fully recognizing the impact or the responsibility that comes with that. One that keeps getting brought up all the time is this idea of like what happens when somebody gets shorted. There's all of a sudden an incentive to cancel somebody or to spread lies if there's a way of making money on the downside. So I don't think it should be too hard for anybody to imagine like the shitty, scary parts of anything crypto related, and definitely anything that ties a digital asset to a human being or to people. But I also think it's just going to be a carryover, a more digital version of what's happening, either in Web 2 or even in the real world, where, colluding to attack or manipulate has been valuable, and it will continue to be valuable. And, digital just reduces the barriers to doing that. So I think it's actually, we're really focused on making sure we work with creators that have sort of ethical and moral alignment with us. I think the brand of Seed Club is something that I'm really protective of, and we really want to be a curator in the space. And so really put a ton of value on that. But I think like the idea of getting a lot more clear around some of the negatives of this is probably something that we should dive into a little bit deeper. I want to make sure that we're being realists with our creators and with the fans and community members who might put financial capital up into these projects and who are like advocating for the space, because I think I'm definitely guilty of not having seen the future clear enough in the social media experience that I had, and I would hate to be, I mean, maybe it's inevitable, but I would hate to be ignorant, at least of to not put the time and effort into at least try to be less ignorant of the negative aspects that will inevitably come from this space.
Dude, again, from like a user perspective, like I'm listening to this podcast and hearing you talk, and I'm like, all right, this dude obviously knows the ins and outs of like social tokens. He's like carrying his company with, a high level of integrity. I've been, not me personally, just an example, been kicking around the idea of, creating a social token. Like what's the next step? Like if I'm like, all right, I'm all about this. I'm eating up with this dude's serving out. How do I get involved? How do I get my social token on Seed Club, or what's the next step?
So I think like the first step for almost everybody that is to get involved in some of these other social token communities. There's a ton of value in learning what happens there, but also in building your network and authority and trust. So whether you're a big artist or you're somebody who's trying to do something innovative without a whole lot of social capital right now, getting involved in those communities is just the number one step. And then I think beyond that, there's sort of two paths. One is we're really encouraging people who are interested in being active in the space, but maybe that don't have an audience or a group of people that can pool social capital together to start to actually work in these projects. So, as I said earlier, like this idea of community managers and, people being the heartbeat of the communities is essential. Successful projects and even the ones that are trying to be successful realize this. And I think there is a lack of help, talent, and awareness or skills to grow these projects. And so getting in volunteering, being a part of something, I say volunteering, like there's usually token rewards for participating. It's part of the value of this, obviously. And so I think that's just a really great place to start. And it's something that we're doing at Seed Club as well, as we have, community managers that are working with us that we put on projects, and really try to bring in that infrastructure to the projects we work with. If you have a bit more of a stature, interesting concept, or have done the aforementioned work and you want to launch a token, we do cohorts on a quarterly basis right now, and might do it a little bit more often as we have some other interesting projects on the go. And so we do applications and interviews. We take in between 8 and 12 projects a cohort. So we're keeping it nice and small so we can, build a community sense and also, add as much value as we can to these projects. And yeah, we're really looking for interesting use cases, experiments, or communities that are sort of existing that we could add a token to that would just, get a lot of value from it. So it's pretty simple. I mean, I think ultimately the best way to do it is to ping me on our Discord or on Twitter or wherever to get that conversation going. It's not like we're in a place where, we've been very cautious about doing outbound, outreach, outbound marketing to any projects. We're really looking for people who are like, hey, this is a thing I want to do. We've raised our hand. Please let me in the door. So we're not in the situation where there's like hundreds and thousands of projects banging on our door just yet, which is, I think, a good thing, just given where the space is. And again, we want to be working with projects who are down to make that experiment and to put in that sort of work. But it's going to change, I think, pretty quickly. Brian Flynn has a great tweet that I think he calls social tokens a fast follower game. Nobody wants to go first because there's uncertainty. You don't really know how to create value here. What does this sort of bind me to? But as soon as it works in a big way for a big name artist, the floodgates are going to open. So I think we're just filling up the dam and the reservoir right now. And the way to get involved is just to reach out. We have a really strong community at Seed Club on our Discord, which can be found through our Twitter account at Seed Club HQ. I'm sure you guys can put it in the show notes, and you can ping me or any of our collaborators who are sort of noted on the side. And that's the easiest first way.
I think that's really, really sound advice, and kind of like zooming out a little bit, like I think all of us, we've been in crypto for more than a few cycles, like from the ICOs to like the excitement with DAOs to DeFi to NFTs and social tokens. And you see that in each of those cycles, there's this opportunity for folks that are new to the space who may not have experience in tech or crypto to kind of raise their hand and join these early stage projects and creators and kind of like get involved on the ground floor. And with social tokens, especially, I think, because I think people underestimate how intense and how much of a time suck it can be to create your own token. Even if you try to design it dead simple, it's almost a full-time job. It probably should be a full-time job and almost distinct from like a community manager job, someone that's thinking explicitly about how to maximize the value of the token, thinking about distribution throughout the community and all that stuff. So like if you are in the space and you're chomping at the bit to kind of get involved in a project or creator, anyone that has a token, I feel like you just reach out to them and be like, yo, can I help you with you and your token? And I feel like almost 99% of the time people will say yes, because I really think that most people are underwater still, even like with Seed Club and incubators, like the incubator that you're setting up, people still need much more help. I mean, speaking from firsthand experience with the Whip and what Rizzle and NFT42 and I've tried to kind of make as simple as possible with our community token, just kind of come to the Whip, get the token and use it to buy like Whip branded wearables and NFTs and stuff like that.
It's a lot of complicated.
Yeah. And then you got to keep thinking about how to level up and everything like that. So like seriously, every single coin out there is a target for someone to come into this space, get involved, get active, learn what to do with it and add value. I really think like we can't say that enough, and we can't talk about how difficult it is enough. I feel like it really kind of always gets generalized or cast aside or talking about other stuff.
Yeah, man. It's 100% agree. There's crypto's, I think, weird, right? Like there's this barrier in understanding, and I think no matter where you are in the space, there's always this feeling like you don't know enough. Like at least maybe I'll speak to myself. I always feel like I don't know enough, right? Like there's always more, and it's probably impossible to understand it all. And so I think it just creates this dynamic where people don't want to raise their hand because they don't feel like they're capable enough or that they do know enough to add value. And sort of leads to this dynamic where people who are maybe less self-aware are the ones who are jumping up and jumping into these projects, and the people who are slightly more self-aware are still sitting on the sidelines. And so I think in a community-based project, sort of EQ is just essential. So if you're sitting there thinking that you don't know enough or that you don't know crypto enough, I guess my message is just raise your hand. This stuff is it's maybe complicated, but it's not impossible to understand. You don't need to understand token economics to be a useful participant and value-added member of a social token team. In fact, it's probably one of the showing up, being there regularly and creating a warm space is super valuable. So don't let that stop you. Raise your hand. Find a community that you're stoked to be a part of. And I'm with you, man. I guarantee you there's room for help.
If it wasn't clear, like, if you have ideas for Whipsy and how to take our token to the next level, fucking reach out. Seriously. Reach out. We're always looking for people to help us with that.
Yeah, we're doing some, I think two things that we're trying to get going. Like I'm involved with Carlos in the forefront.news project, which is sort of like the marketplace listing site for all social tokens. Some interesting things that he's working on, both trying to bring community events to broader awareness, like a place where you can go and find projects or events. That's maybe a good way to get into things. And also I think there's this emergent job board type of dynamic that seems to be coming, especially into the newsletter that we write on every Monday. Increasingly, there's projects that are reaching out saying, "Hey, we're looking for people like this." And so I think you're going to start to see more infrastructure to pull people in the door. But maybe that's a good place to start too. If you're even earlier on going, I don't know where to go with this stuff, go to forefront.news, click on one of the creator profiles. There's a Twitter account, reach out, and boom. It's like probably only 5 steps to being involved in a more serious way on one of these projects.
One of the questions we always like to ask people as we get towards the end is just always sort of curious what brought you into the space, or what you've been like collecting on the side, or like, any sort of projects that are totally unrelated to yours that you've been, collecting or are sitting in your Ethereum wallet, or that have just been interesting to you that, don't necessarily have to do with your primary focus.
I mean, so I remember watching, going down some deep YouTube rabbit hole and having the idea of like decentralized autonomous organizations kind of come up, and this guy was explaining it in the terms of, self-driving cars owning themselves and then earning money and owning other cars, and this network kind of growing. And, that blew my brain. And it was so obvious to me that something like that will happen eventually. That's what got me to buy Ethereum probably back in 2016. And to want to get into the DAO. And, my luck was that I didn't know enough about how to use the technology to actually put that Ethereum into the DAO, which was a huge saving grace. But it sort of got me really stoked on this idea of, autonomous organizations. And I don't think C Club set up as a DAO, but I don't think that's really what I mean by DAO. What I'm stoked on is smart contracts that are running economies themselves. So I think one of the projects that's really got me interested recently is Neolastics. It's this sort of generative art on-chain art that it's based on a bonding curve, and there's sort of a revenue stream back to the artist, but the vast majority of the economics stay in that bonding curve. And there's sort of interesting games that come out from that. I think it's just like a very simple implementation of this, but it got me stoked on just seeing more experiments of these, what I think are truly autonomous organizations. You launch the smart contract and it is its thing, and it goes and does its thing, and it creates value. So stoked on that. I think I'm a late comer to the NFT space. And so really, just immersing myself in that world. And I've got to see it from sort of like, more of the social token side and maybe the creator side. So I'm excited to see some of like the experiments that are going to be done on the edges. I think people will be surprised by how a lot of these creators are thinking about using NFTs. Really stoked on what the Zora team's doing, what the foundation team's doing, what RAC, what Blau are doing as creators. And also, as a Vancouver born and bred, it's really great to see what the NFT X project has been able to do in the last little while. Again, I'm not super up to date on all the details and stuff behind that, but Alex has just been a force of nature out there, I think, and seems to be a really cool human being. And as I said, I'd like to represent Canada, so I'll shout out to NFTX. Yeah, and then I'm again just really still interested in how people come together to create value on the internet. So Meta Factory, Meta Game, I think probably could be considered social tokens or DAOs. Super interested in what they're working on there, and also a shout out to the Open Law crew for just really trying to push the regulators forward around DAOs and structures, and then also the Mulak family for what I think is going to be a really awesome tool set to empower a whole lot of new, lower barrier ways for people to collaborate and coordinate on the internet. And then, I think one of the projects that I'm really interested in is the meme project. I think Jordan is just a solid human being. And I think in that project is sort of the early stages or the seeds of what will be a new template within the social token and token space. This idea of one asset being used to represent ownership and membership or participation, and another coordination, and there being some sort of value created on chain. I think that's just an inevitability, and the meme sort of team is really pushing that forward, and same with James Young in the Collabland team. So I think there's I guess in my answer there I realized that I don't put my head out of the world that I'm in too much, which I think just speaks to the amount of inertia and intensity I think of the space that I'm in. But it's just there's so much cool stuff happening. Games, man, I'm stoked to see the Sandbox game later tonight. Like, this is just going to blow me away. God. And then there's also another one that was more like a World of Warcraft type cross crypto game that I don't even know what it's called, but I guess I don't know what that looks like, man. There's just going to be too much cool shit out there.
Dude, all the projects that you rattled off, it just, oh my God, it's so insane that, first of all, you rattled off.
Oh, okay, good. I didn't know how I'm supposed to answer.
And it's not even, no. And it's not even a fraction of the amazing projects that are out there. It's just, there's no better space to be in, to get excited about than our space.
Man, how much of like a blessing has it been? I just keep pinching myself that every morning I get to wake up. I mean, this morning I woke up, I didn't even start my fire yet. I got my toucan here, shout out Canada. And I'm plugging into the metaverse, which sure, it's not like, we're not running around and high-fiving each other or wearing fancy clothes, but this is a version of the metaverse, and get to plug into a bunch of brilliant human beings that are like just doing cool shit. And yeah, there's some assholes out there, and they're easy to spot, but the network that I've been welcomed into in this space has just been phenomenal. And I include you guys in that. It's just like a very warm, thoughtful, collaborative space, and being a part of something new, I think if you're starting your career off right now and you're not looking at the crypto space, you're making a huge mistake. I mean, unless you just don't care about technology or money or value or the future, which again, or anything cool at all. Yeah, right. You should just be in the crypto
space. 100%. Yeah, blessed to be in the metaverse, this digital virtual place to live, work, and play, and just do all the things. Like, we're literally creating the future. And I know a lot of people, and we sort of touched on this earlier, kind of want to abstract a lot of the Web3 things and the friction points and things like that crypto sort of introduces. But at the same time, like the flip side of that is that we get the most thoughtful people that take the time to kind of understand what's going on, to kind of learn the tools and the processes, to kind of come over the wall into the space. and we're accumulating just the richest, most like highest EQ, high caliber, passionate, like human capital imaginable. And it's just, as long as we can keep doing that, even when the inevitable like bad actors do come in, hopefully we're at this point where we just have such a tight, not tight knit, but like just this great base from which to kind of like counteract that and make sure that we're ready to deal with those inevitabilities. But before we get too deep down the rabbit hole, and I want to be cognizant of your time and everything, and listeners as well, I want to make sure that before we wrap this up, that you take the time to kind of shout out all the channels that folks should be following you at. And if you have any announcements that you want people to pay attention to, this would be a perfect time to let the folks know.
This is the shill minute, right? Listen, we're
yeah, man.
My vision for Seed Club, and I think the vision of our community is one where Seed Club is owned by the creators and by the people who create value for creators. And so the beginning parts of that are being planted right now. And the best way to get involved is to follow us both on Twitter at Seed Club HQ or on our Discord, which you can find through our Twitter account. Our website is seedclub.xyz. And I think if anything in our conversation today was interesting or appealing to you as a listener, I just encourage you to come and say hi. It's still so early in the space. We're looking for fellow travelers, and I think it's an interesting and hopefully bright future for folks who do get involved. And I encourage everybody just to come by, reach out. I'm super accessible on the internet. I'm that tall guy on Twitter and in real life. And you're going to see a lot more from us over the next 8 weeks or so. I think we have about 10 projects that we're working on or we'll start working with next week. And one of the things that we're putting together is a bit of an event to introduce them to the world. So get in our Discord, get on our Twitter. You'll be the first to know about that. And I think sort of be firmly on the front lines of this emerging social token space.
Very cool. Well, Jess, it was an absolute pleasure to have the chance to talk to you about everything that you're doing at Seed Club. Really looking forward to you hopping on the virtual stage at the WIP in a couple hours as well. Excited to introduce that world to you. Hopefully that takes you down a whole nother rabbit hole with us. But just thanks again for taking the time and keep on creating.
I'm very, very stoked to jump into the metaverse with you guys there.
Yeah, man. It's been great, dude. Thank you, man.
Hey, everyone. Matthew here. Thank you for listening to today's show. I just want to remind everyone of this month's sponsor, Whale Street. Whale Street is the DeFi engine that powers NFT economics on a massive scale. They make huge currency swaps happen, or whale swaps as they're called, with very small slippage costs and without crashing the system. They also engineered the largest ever NFT bundle and fractionalized it into the historic B20 tokens. Whale Street is all about upside, so dip into the liquidity pools for rich rewards. For B20, join discord.com/whale. That's discord.com/WHALE. And follow Whale Street on Twitter at Whale Street OFFL. Thank you, and see you next episode.
Podcast.